Joining us on this episode is Ryan Browne. Based in Brooklyn, Ryan and Heidi own and operate two incredibly successful wedding studios with a staff of 10, Forged in the North and After It All. For years, they've been creating a wealth of love and art stemming from their passion of the architecture of a big city and their simultaneous affinity for landscapes and the outdoors. Ryan and Heidi continually push themselves, their brands, and their creativity in a way that keeps them at the forefront of the industry and held in high regard by their peers. I'm Kyle Wilson, and this is A Photographer's Problem. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm so good. You're not out of Brooklyn though anymore, right? You're somewhere else outside the city?
We spent 13 years in the city, and it was an awesome time, but family expansion and office expansion, just general space needs kind of kicked us out of the city. So we're out in the North Shore of Long Island, this little place called Sea Cliff, which has been quite lovely for us. So yeah.
Yeah. As someone that doesn't know the geography of New York and Long Island super well, what's that look like for you to get back into the city and do work?
Yeah, it's so what's a lot of people who move outside the city, they go to sometimes Jersey or upstate is very common. Um, where we are is quite fast to get into like Brooklyn and Queens, which is where a lot of our weddings are. Um, and so at the end of like a wedding, I might be shooting in like Williamsburg, maybe a 40-minute drive to get home. I mean, it's really not that bad.
No, that's not
Um,
bad at all.
Maybe like a little over an hour in bad traffic. But yeah, very manageable. It's a little bit of an adjustment, but like I think overall, like we're quite happy with this move.
That's awesome. Out of curiosity, because I've never marketed in New York particularly or dug too far into it, but you guys are obviously really successful everywhere. Um, do you market individual borough or like do you find that you have individual boroughs that you work in more? Like for me, it would be weird to say, oh, I'm only going to work in the Loop or West Loop
Yeah.
or something like that. It would be kind of everywhere, but such a different city scale.
It's interesting. The wedding industry does somehow tend to be a little sectioned off in each borough.
Mm,
And then you have Long Island, you have like upstate New York, Jersey weddings. Each one of those things do tend to kind of be their own markets. Um, I would say with our style, our couples tend to be getting married in Brooklyn and Queens, and occasionally in Manhattan. Not too frequently are we out on Long Island, but we're also upstate quite a bit. There's definitely like a big, we were just talking before we hopped on here, like there's a huge diversity of weddings in New York, which is what makes it really fun to be here in the wedding industry. But the, they definitely take us everywhere, but I do find that like, yeah, we certainly have our spots. Part of that is intentional. I think part of that is just by happenstance with our style and the types of couples that we attract.
super cool. Would you say that the majority of your work is New York these days? Are you traveling for most things? I know you've got a family, so things kind of shift, but I've always I've always known you guys as an East Coast studio, but
Yeah.
also as just they're a force in the north. They're everywhere. Like there's no
Yeah.
limitations to them.
Uh, these days, definitely New York is the focus. I think the focus for Heidi and I, my wife who runs the business with me, um, we have kids now. We want to stay local. We enjoy shooting in New York City. We enjoy shooting upstate, although sometimes we don't want to be, maybe don't want to be doing those 2, 3 hour drives like every weekend. Um, Back in, I mean, this was like very early on. We were traveling a lot. This was before kids. This is when we were like, kind of just very much finding our own voice, finding our own style, wanting to travel as much as possible while we're young. We had a great opportunity early on in our careers to like start spending our winters in New Zealand and shooting during their wedding season down there, being flipped from the New York wedding
Yeah,
season.
kind of easy
Um,
mode for the winter time.
yeah, yeah. So it kept us really busy. It also just allowed us to travel to all sorts of cool places. And I think that became sort of like a selling point to New York couples that we were sort of
Mm,
perceived as these worldwide shooters and traveled to cool places to shoot cool weddings with cool couples. And that was appealing to people here locally. So,
I
um,
think that makes total sense. I'm sure you guys probably had, I might have been inspired by your page for all I know, of like, hey, here's where our travel dates are. We're going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
going and doing, and it immediately, if a client was concerned and they hadn't thought about flying in a photographer, they lost all concern when they saw, oh, this
yeah,
dude's in 12 countries this year. I'm not really worried if he can get to my
yeah,
wedding. He obviously does this all the time.
definitely. Yeah, I think it was, you know, it was tricky because weddings internationally really never paid as well as a New York wedding. Um, our philosophy when we traveled was, and this is whether we were shooting in Europe or New Zealand or Asia, is we charged what we felt were fair local rates for our work, which sometimes meant taking a lot less money. And so sometimes we would charge for travel depending on where we're traveling from, sometimes not. So, like for instance, with the New Zealand weddings, we would fly ourselves there and then we would just charge travel out of Auckland. So if they had a wedding in Queenstown, okay, you're flying us from Auckland to Queenstown. Um, but all of that came at a cost, really a cost of not staying locally and shooting weddings here. So I think ultimately it paid off, although I can't say it was any stroke of genius. I think we were just lucky that it paid off. And so um, now, but now we are shooting a lot more locally. And for there was a few years there where our other shooters on our team were kind of traveling instead of us, so we would kind of send them to all these cool places. They had a few years of like really cool traveling jobs.
Not a bad gig.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun for them, and now they've sort of graduated to the spot we're in, which is like I think we all just want to stay in New York. We love it here. The weddings are great here. The couples are great. There's no need to force these weddings where we go and travel all these places. We,
Yeah, weddings and photography in general, I feel like is always this. I see it as a door opener, and
yeah,
so even if I'm not, as a kid, I didn't travel really anywhere. That's not how we grew up,
yeah,
and the photography gave me an opportunity, even if I wasn't making money, as being paid in the fact that like get me to this country, get me to this
yeah,
place. Now I get to not only make really cool work, meet really cool people, but also probably plan my own trip surrounding it that would not have happened had it not been for that booking or that wedding. And I still do
yep.
it to this day. I just traded an engagement session or a couple session last week for a girl who's going to teach me tennis lessons. So like it
That's
still
awesome.
translates now as like, how can this open a door for me, even if it's
Yeah,
not a financial experience?
yeah, I love that. I think that's what's so one of the cool things about this job is that flexibility, that ability to choose your own schedule with those kinds of trade-offs that make sense for you in that particular moment in life.
Yeah.
Um,
Eventually it became like, if I was home, I was a homebody. I was
yeah,
like, okay, I've already been gone for, 20 days. I've got the dog. I want to be home. And now, especially living in a place that I really love,
yeah,
especially in the summertime in Chicago, I don't really want to travel anywhere. I muse around and mope around all winter whining about when will summer be. I don't want to leave
yep,
when it's finally here. I want to be here.
yeah, yep. Chicagoans really embrace the summer too. I mean, if you want to talk about cities that just completely open up um, in the summer, Chicago has to be among
Yeah.
the top. I
The
mean, it
energy
really
shift
everyone's
is
out.
incredible. I
Hmm.
when I have friends that visit the winter, which I now have a rule that like no one's allowed to visit me in the
Yeah,
winter because I'm
right,
tired of having to
right.
explain about no, you have to understand all these patio seats are going to have butts in them later,
Yeah,
but in
yeah,
three
yeah. It
months
will be
it's
cool.
really cool. The lake is really cool. I know there's three people out here right now and it's
Yeah,
sad, but there will be
yeah,
packed.
yeah,
And it's but in the summer, that first day, that first like sunny day, it's such a shift. And I'm
yeah.
sure New York has a similar experience. I'm sure there's other like
Yes.
European country or cities that do too, but
Hmm.
because because it is so cold here for so long,
Yep.
we really shift. But
Yeah.
um, well, I've got some questions to kind of dive through as we go through this
Yeah.
conversation, and feel free
Cool.
to elaborate on them, expand, or just you can be short or brief, whatever floats your boat.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
what's been the proudest moment of your career? You guys have a really long-standing career, multiple studios. It's both you and your wife. There's a lot to pick from, I'm sure.
That's a tough one. I mean, like it's this is like I'll give the answer in two different ways, I guess. The proudest moment in one sense is right now because for us we feel like we've spent so much time building something with other people in our studio, and now we have two studios, which we can talk about later, maybe. Um, that I think for both Heidi and I, we just feel very proud of where we've come from and gotten to this place of stability for us and stability for other studios on our team. So right now, that's what makes us most proud. It's not like, oh, I made this image that, really impressed me, like something that I got excited about. Like, of course, those are exciting moments, but I think for us, it's like some of those bigger life things that are happening for us and for everyone on our team.
Yeah,
But
the
I guess
result of a long road of ambitious success.
yeah, yeah. So that is very rewarding and satisfying, and there's definitely a big sense of pride in that and what we've built and what we've been able to create for other people who have all contributed and helped to be a part of that. So I think that is probably the overarching answer. It's not one single moment, but it's sort of an ongoing thing. Um, but maybe another way to answer that would be, early on in our careers, we were very honored to get this rangefinder Rising Star 30 award, which was very cool for us because so many people we looked up to early on in our career had been on that list, and we felt like that was some type of hurdle that we had crossed. That we're like, okay, hey, maybe we are onto something here. Maybe we have found a voice in our work, and that was a really cool thing. And that same year, there was like a handful of other people on that list who were close friends of ours, and so that was like, I think for all of us just like a very fun thing to be a part of. And there was, you just connect with people in a different way,
Yeah,
or connect with new people through that kind of like
it's a really
recognition, I guess.
interesting. Like I've been nominated for it and gone through the process, along with Cody and Allison Photo out of Nashville. We were really tight during that time, and we
Yeah,
were
yeah,
in an Airbnb in Palm Springs when we were like getting the call from Rangefinder whether or not it went through. And it's just a really interesting experience around that time. You're like, oh, here are my like 10 buddies, my 10 peers. We're all kind of doing this thing. Maybe we're gonna get it, maybe we won't. And it's pretty interesting timing.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I think two, there's sort of two different ways to see that. I think there was after we had gotten that award, there was a sense of maybe not having to prove something to ourselves anymore. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe there was just a sense of like, okay, maybe just the crazy risk taking and ambition, we tone that back a little bit and kind of figure out what is working well and just ride on that a little bit longer. And I think we've slowly worked off that over the years, although I would say now we shoot quite differently than we did back then, but
Yeah.
that's probably the case for most photographers. So
Yeah, you kind of change your taste is like, there's this really great Ira Glass quote I like that resonates with that, I feel like, a bit, where when you first start out in any creative endeavor, your taste is killer and you're trying to constantly chase after it, but you're not really able
yeah,
to do it with your abilities until you do this volume of work and try and fail and try and fail. And then
yeah,
once you catch up to it, your tastes just keep evolving. And so you're kind of chasing them. And so
yeah,
I have felt that way in my career and just watching your work or anyone else's, that your taste and your ability to nail that mark has continually evolved, which
yeah,
is also really amazing to see for like I've followed you for years at this point, and many other studios as well, where I go, ooh, it's cool to see like what an 8-year difference looks like between
yeah,
people that you really look up to their work.
yeah, yeah. I think that's so interesting. I mean, um, th- you know, the other thing is just I think our goals are different now. With early on in your career, you are trying to establish yourself, trying new techniques and making new images. And there's a selfishness associated with that that can be unhealthy, but also I think is sort of a requirement to get you to the next level of
Yeah.
being happy with your work and um, doing a service to your clients, which is trying your best every time. And so I think there's a balance there. Whereas now I'm not as interested in taking big risks. I'm interested in making my clients super happy. And of course, I'm going to just bust my ass on every wedding, but it's a different kind of drive. Now I'm much more interested in making sure their wedding is going really well, making sure that they're having a good time. I definitely want to get them great images, but my primary ambition is not to impress myself, it's to make them super happy. So it's a little bit of a different situation. And
I think that's fair though. I
maybe,
think that at the beginning of any creative career, specifically weddings, I've always looked at it like my very first wedding that I may have shot. Maybe it was, I don't know, $500, whatever it was. My goal from
yeah,
that was to leave with one photo for me, like one that
yeah,
did what I want, and then the rest is for them. And
yeah,
eventually that continues to grow, and it is a little selfish. It's like, all right, I want this wedding to look a certain way for this editorial, this advertisement, this print, this thing, so that will hopefully lead to XYZ. But it is
yeah,
cool, and I don't think I thought about it till you started saying it now, about there is that shift when everything's kind of steady. I've kind of
yeah,
done all the things and the styles I was hoping to do, and it's very comfortable now. The language of weddings is very fluent for you. And so on a day, you can be less concerned about like what it is for you or your brand
yeah.
or your website or your blog, and really shift back to like that selfless role of, hey, it's
Yeah,
about the two people that paid me to be here for this really particular day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think yeah, it's just a different balance of things now. But I've thought about this a lot. Would I be in the place I'm at right now had I not gone, had Heidi and I
Ugh.
not gone through that stage of finding our own style, shooting a little selfishly, which, by the way, most of the time can very much benefit your clients. This isn't like a zero sum situation, but um, so I don't know. I don't have a way to A/B test that, but
No, I personally think
for us
probably
it
not.
worked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that if you take it another way, I think wedding photography is so bizarre in the creative space because we are artists and we are creating things that we want external validation from, which happens to, rather than be our peers or other people, it happens to be people that are paying us. And then there's all this very bureaucratic business version of our work that we have to do. But behind all that, we
yeah,
still have to be people that are paintbrushes on a canvas.
yeah.
And if you're not pushing that selfishly to some regard, you're you're just gonna make regular photos, which is totally fine. But there's a
Hmm.
big difference between regular photos and the type of work that you create.
Yeah, yeah. I think, a lot of people possibly get burnt out in this industry because they haven't had a chance to kind of develop their work enough. They've just been sort of thrown into the gauntlet of, grinding out to try to get jobs and then
Yep.
shooting those and then going on to the next. And that can make you feel very like just sort of a cog in this big wedding industry machine and not make you feel valued. And I can see how that wears on people, and that's why people tend to exit this industry very quickly. Um, and so, I think for us, we've been fortunate that um, clients um, tend to uh, prioritize us on their wedding days, which feels great. But at the same time, now it's that balance of I just want to make sure they're happy and they're having a good time. But yeah, I think there's like sort of a respect that we have going into the situation because people really love our work and they want us to kind of do our thing. And that's, I feel like now we're just at that very like well balanced moment in our careers. And so,
Yeah.
but
It's
yeah, I don't
equally
know. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten there without the other
yeah.
portion.
I think it's equally as exciting when I go into a wedding and it seems like everybody there in the morning knows about me already. Every bridesmaid and
Yeah.
groomsman is like, "Oh, you're that photographer. You're Micro Jupiter." Like the conversation's been had in some other room because the client is so excited and they've given me the trust. And it's equally bad the other way when you're just a vendor. I feel like I just got hired to come fix your sink. Like I'm just doing a thing, and whatever it takes to get to that part. If it took like the selfish approach or the overly enthusiastic, ambitious burnout approach, maybe sometimes some people take. I think the reward of having weddings where you walk into and you don't have to explain yourself. You can just pitch an idea or a thought or do a thing and they just go, yeah, that guy knows what he's doing. I'm going to let him do it. That feels like a reward within itself. And an even easier place to then be concerned about the client, really be concerned and go, I'm going to focus on you today and you're giving me the room to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. It's nice to have some pull on the wedding day in terms of what goes down. I mean, this is going to sound weird saying it this way, but like, I really do feel like I oftentimes know what's best. And that's like a weird thing to say, but there's so many different personalities and sometimes egos involved. And I'm just so checked out of that at this point. Like I'm just so not interested in having any kind of ego battles with anyone and just really focused on letting our couples have a great time. That I do really appreciate being able to have the space to make decisions and kind of dictate things sometimes.
I do think
we also work with mostly good vendors and planners and other people. So for the most part, this is not an issue, but
I think it's like when you first, at least for me, when I first started out, there weren't really any wedding planners around because the weddings were cheaper. And then there's this weird window of wedding planners and vendors that I just don't like. And because oftentimes I felt like my idea was probably, I did know best. And I either have to be really assertive and take the dominant role in that, or there are wedding days where I show up and I don't know, I've been sad that week maybe, and I'm a little more passive and all right, videographer guy, you can just run the show. But after a bunch of those, I feel like every wedding I have now, if the vendor is there and hired by this particular client who has also gone through my process, they're probably awesome. They're probably going to give me the room to do everything I need, just like the mutual respect is really heavy. And it's only once in a blue that I have to pull in and go, whoa. No, we're going to do it this way. And it's so much less now than it used to be, which is actually really nice.
Yeah. Agreed. Fully agree.
As a segue from like proudest things, what has been throughout this whole process of traveling, moving, being ambitious, having multiple studios, kids, all the things, what's been the worst business decision that you think you've made along the way?
The worst decision. I mean, there was time, I think this was like maybe 6 years ago or so, 7 years ago, we had considered expanding Forge in the North from doing just photo and video to doing other things like planning, DJ, sort of full vendor service. And we did kind of dabble in that a little bit. We had 1 year where we kind of trial ran some DJ jobs and planning. It was, I don't know if it was like necessarily like just a straight up bad decision, but I think it was just the wrong direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
that seems like a intense shift.
It's a very intense shift, and it's out of our wheelhouse, and it brings on liabilities that you aren't used to as a photographer or videographer. And so, that was an interesting attempt. But I'm glad we like nipped it pretty quickly.
I'm really glad that idea hasn't I'm glad that idea hasn't rolled across my mind ever. I've had partners and other photographer peers who want to start wedding venues, and I know that's a cool idea, but every time I hear it, I'm like, no, I'm good. That sounds like way too much. I like my one sliver of the pie. Going into planning and everything else sounds gnarly.
Yeah, it is. And at the end of the day, it is a bit also counterintuitive that we would want to build great relationships with planners, for instance, and then offer a competing planner of our own. So you're sort of self-sabotaging in a way, but uh, so we did not go in that direction. We instead went in the direction of building out what we know, which is more photo and video shooters as a part of our team and our other studio. But yeah, that's probably. I mean, there was also part of that was like a photo booth, which is a little bit more of a natural progression.
Yeah, that seems like usually those two things go hand in hand.
Yes, and so I'm definitely not knocking that. I think that's a very natural transition for any photographer to make. But we did attempt that, and Heidi reminds me of that failure by pointing out that we saw the giant pelican of like photo booth gear sitting in our basement that I've been saying for years. Oh yeah, I'll sell that. I'll sell that. And so it's just now staring me in the face every time I look at it, like as a reminder of what didn't work.
I've done the booth too. An old studio that I had like back in a smaller town did the booth, and beyond the fact that it's kind of a total pain in the ass, I think the product doesn't tend to match the product that the rest of the wedding work is, and so it feels kind of strange. It's like if Pepsi all of a sudden released cigarettes, you'd be like, wait. Those two things don't go together.
Right.
So yeah, it always feels a little strange. I personally have a bias against. I just don't like photo booths as a person.
Yeah.
I don't like playing it. I like photos. I don't like all the props and things, and so it just wasn't something I wanted to continue. Besides the fact that you bailed on planning, what's been your best business decision?
I think definitely the creation of this other studio we formed, which is called After It All, and we started that this was like 2018, 2019. That was probably the thing that we had an idea about. We kind of had theories of how it could work. We started it, and then it went and exceeded our expectations. And so that was really cool to see. Essentially, the gist of it was going into 2018, we had way too many inquiries than we could book. There was 4 of us at that time, me and Heidi, and then Paul and Ben, and they did photo and video. Heidi and I do photo and video. So it's kind of a nice, comfortable studio setup. 2 teams that could do photo and video, really buttoned up. Everyone kind of, people knew us in the New York wedding industry that we did that, and so it was great. But for the jobs that we had to turn away, the top 2 reasons for doing that were either we were too expensive or we were already booked. And so the idea kind of naturally came out of that, which is, well, why don't we create a studio that has cheaper pricing and more shooters for availability? So it solves those 2 problems. And that's what we did. And it just kind of blew up, and like it was just getting booked up like crazy, and not cannibalizing our Forge in the North studio at the same time. That was also sort of a risk or a concern we had going in. So I would say that has been our like best business decision, is just seeing how well the After It All studio has done. And I think that's where, we spend, just as much time thinking about and also just, editing and phone calls and emails and all the things that are needed to run a studio. But it takes up a lot of our time and attention now.
Do you mind me asking what's the disparity between the 2 pricings? Because you mentioned like not cannibalizing your own work, and obviously if someone's, I've played around with the associates and or second studio ideas. I always found it really hard to navigate. Like, new wedding inquiry comes in and or a connection from a vendor or a planner, and then trying to say, well, I'm busy, but I'm going to push it this direction, and without affecting the other. But I'd be interested if it's like, is it a $5,000 price difference? Is it like 2 or 3? That kind of keeps the two in their own lanes.
It changed. So, I mean, we've gone through pricing changes with Forge in the North in the last couple of years, where, for instance, Paul is taking just way fewer weddings now, and so we have upped his pricing significantly to account for that sort of supply and demand situation. For Heidi and I, we're strictly booking photo and video jobs. So it depends, but with the After It All pricing, we've found that, and this is a bit anecdotal, I don't have data points on this, but this is just from getting thousands of inquiries over the past however many years we've been doing this, that probably the vast majority of budgets are in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. 5 might even be high. That's high for a lot of people.
Yeah, I do think that is the majority. You're right on that.
Yeah, and so our goal was to price it competitively so that, anyone else that these couples might be looking at in that price range would, we would look the most appealing in that price range, right? So that was the goal. So yeah, the After It All pricing, when we first launched, it was like, mid 3,000s, and we've kind of upped it every year since then. And Heidi and I handle all the editing for the After It All studio shooters, whereas on Forge in the North, that's very different. We do not do the editing, where sort of each shooter on the Forge in the North team is their own kind of individual artist that the couple works with from start to finish, and it's very kind of dialed in like that. Whereas, After All is like they will pick a person to shoot their wedding, whether that's like Adam or Jennifer or Tina on our team. And so they'll still be all in with them, but then right when the wedding's done, we sort of take over. And right now we have it divided where Heidi's kind of handling all of the After It All wedding editing. And then
we can say wedding. We're all going to know what it is. We all know what it is. We all know what it is.
Say that 10 times fast.
That's amazing,
so,
because like you said, I would agree with that. Even if you look at, say, the not.com, if you're advertising there or something, they top out at 5,000. So that 3 to 5 and even 5,500 or so is really this tight pocket of clientele that once, I'm just going to take a wild guess that your pricing is in the 7, 8, 9, 10K range for Forge in the North for photo, similar to, say, myself or something, or our other peers, that as much as I'd love to take that $4,500 day, that sounds nice. I'd love it. It sounds great, but I'm booked, or it's too low, or it's far away. And at this particular junction, like we talked about, I'm just not willing to leave the house and the dog for days at a time to do that. Yeah. So the fact that you can kind of scoop those up while also having these associate photographers who can get in on that. Have you run into issues where like you have an associate for a year or two and they're like, cool, I've learned all the things I need to learn now, and right when you're like, cool, you're right in my sweet spot, they're like, bye, I'm gonna go do my own thing? Has that been a hurdle?
So that actually hasn't happened. The only thing that has happened is people move and leave. Like, we've lost 2 After It All shooters to the West Coast, and so that's sort of there was like other life things happening for them that brought them out there. So yeah, we definitely, I mean, when we're bringing people onto After It All, we're trying to avoid as much as possible people using us for either just like randomly, just like, oh, I just need to fill up my calendar. Like, some people want that. It's not quite what we're looking for. Or some people looking for that sort of stepping stone situation of like, I'll just like build my portfolio and gain experience and then leave. There's no way to know this, right, when you're going in, because no one,
it's like the dream person
overtly say that.
Like the dream ideal person says, hey, I don't even want to own a studio, I just want to work. Cool. You're boom, I'll put you in there for 5 years.
Yeah.
But to find that person is always so difficult.
That's definitely the hardest part. I mean, with Forge in the North, our Forge in the North shooters are much more permanent, and
Yeah.
they are exclusive to Forge in the North. They do not take bookings outside of Forge in the North, full stop. After It All is built on a much more flexible model because we're handling the editing, so they're not making as much money as a Forge in the North shooter. And we're more interested in finding people who, yeah, maybe don't want to run their business, or just don't want to develop it as much, or maybe they're shooting other things. Like some of our shooters, that they do editorial work, they do other kinds of work. They just kind of want some wedding jobs here and there. After It All could be perfect for that. We had one of our shooters was going through school, and she was using After It All jobs as like her job, her like school job, right? So that's also a perfect setup where she doesn't have time to run a business or do all the editing, but to like show up and shoot weddings that are simple and fun and local. That's a great setup for them. So, but yeah, finding the right people to fit these very specific criteria is far and away the toughest thing about running studios. Is
Yeah.
just finding the right people.
That's amazing you've been able to do it. I think like just because your level of work is already so high coming out of Forge in the North, like the quality of it is so spectacular that to find people that are going to be at least in the same league of abilities and fit all that other criteria is pretty amazing that you guys have been able to do it, sustain it, create it, also through COVID, of course, and find a system that works so you guys can still have this like really premier product, Forge in the North, and this not that it isn't premier, but this secondary studio as well. So
Yeah. No, it's thank you for saying that. I mean, all I can say is we gave great opportunities to the other people on our Forge in the North team when they were much younger and newer in their career, and they have just fully embraced that and surprised us and exceeded all expectations. And so it's been really cool. Everyone has grown on our team, including Heidi and I. And yeah, with the After It All shooters, we always pitch them to clients as sort of up and comers in the industry. They don't have the hundreds and hundreds of weddings of experience that we do on the Forge in the North side, but they are ambitious. They're awesome. They're affordable right now, but they may not be in a few years. And I think some people recognize that. And so,
and you're vouching for them, like you
Yes.
your own word lends credibility to it in itself.
Yeah,
that I think is also a really big deal.
yeah. They're especially early on when we hadn't booked jobs with them, and we were just using like a few weddings that we re-edited and put in the portfolio to sort of say, hey, this is the shooter, this is the editing, whatever, to kind of sell them on jobs. There was definitely more. I had to step in more frequently to say, I promise that this is going to be great, and you're going to get awesome images. We're hinging our entire reputation on this. I think people responded well to that, and with the pricing being competitive, those two things paired together, it was sort of just this perfect mixture that made people want to book. Like so.
Did you feel comfortable shifting in this role of? I'm sure there was a ton of feedback that you had to give these shooters as they learn the style that you're hoping to come away with, and just kind of like say, hey, here's, I'd be interested in how you did it. Like, did you sit them down with the whole catalog and say, hey, we're going to call this together. You need to see like what's good, bad, or the other.
We've not too overtly. We will definitely send text messages here and there, emails, things to look for, hey, think about this, whatever. But I would say just as frequently, we're also praising their work, sending them images that we're just like genuinely impressed by. Like, this is an awesome image. Like, yes, yes, yes. And kind of like saying, this is good. No, honestly, for the most part, I would say one other thing there is like trying to have them second shoot with us as well. I think can help, and there's sort of something where they know that anything we do on a wedding day, the Forge in the North shooters, they can full outright steal for themselves, and they know that's going to be like a guaranteed kind of good technique for them. Like they don't have to worry about whether we're going to like that or not, obviously. So, um, but no, for the most part, like each shooter, we really do want them to be their own person, their own artist. And so we're not really that handed as maybe some people might think. Everyone is super talented, and we just sort of try to give them as many opportunities to like grow and shoot great couples at great locations. And as you know, as a wedding photographer, there's so many parameters put on you. And oftentimes, yes, part of the job is with all those parameters, how well can you do? But I think the other aspect to the job is if there are no constraints on you, where's your ceiling? How good are you? Right? When the light's perfect, you have the time, you have a couple that's comfortable, all those things that are working. Okay, now what are you made of? Right?
I
So
actually
I think
think
like
that
there's
can be
both things matter.
more stressful. The only
Yeah.
time I've
Yeah.
ever, and stress is like a tough word because I don't actually really get stressed at weddings. I think that feeling went away. I was already 100 weddings deep at like 17, so I just didn't know stress. But
Yeah.
I shot this wedding for an elopement in Barcelona, and I got to the location, and I knew that Jordan Voth had already photographed there too, and I did a whole thing not to look at his work because I was like, let's just leave that for something else. And I
Yeah.
got there, and it was perfect. The day was perfect. These like incredible manicured gardens, and I walked around with the
Yeah.
videographer, and I went, whew, I better do a good job. The only thing
Yeah.
that's the limiter here today is me. I have got to
Yeah.
do a good job today. And it's the only time I ever felt that kind of pressure of everything is perfect. The sky is literally the limit.
Yeah.
Don't
Yep.
fuck it up.
Yeah. 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 I completely resonate with that. And so I think it's it's important that when you're running a studio, you try to give those opportunities to your studio shooters, and that could be by curating um, curating your job, how you distribute jobs to people in certain ways, or um, maybe taking a financial hit as the studio to give that couple an extra hour so that timeline isn't so constrained and they have
Yeah.
some more time for portraits or
Really setting your
whatever the case
photographer up
is.
for success.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's amazing. What's the camera you're carrying most these days, whether it be for work, personal, or everything in between? What's kind of on you like all the time now?
So I have never been that photographer that always walks around with a camera. So for me, it's an iPhone. That's my camera that I'm just carrying around. And I certainly use it a lot, but I've just never, there's sometimes like on certain trips, I'll take a film camera or something like that, but there's something that about that I've just never really been much of a like hobbyist street photographer type
Yep.
person. That's just not me. And even though I do see the appeal in it and I think it's fun, for me, I'm not that walk around with a camera guy. But and it, I mean, iPhones do shoot amazing images, right? Like it's kind of incredible how far they've come. But for work, it's the GFX, the Fujifilm GFX. So with different GFX iterations over the years, but that has been the camera that like definitely re-excited me back in 2018. I think is when we switched to to Fujifilm from
Yeah,
Canon.
I remember it came out.
Um,
I think it came out in 16 or 17. I did one
yeah,
shoot with it. Like I got
yep,
my hands on it in like a pre-release thing, and I didn't know it at the
nice.
time. And I did one shoot, and I was like, okay, why do I need this camera?
Yeah,
I was trying
yeah,
to sell myself, and I knew it wasn't
yeah,
going to be for weddings, at least not the first GFX.
yep, yep,
But what an incredible camera series too. We don't do too much gear
yeah,
stuff on this podcast, but yeah, pretty amazing. I get the idea of not carrying a camera around all
yeah,
the time. I don't know what to do with those images sometimes. Like they don't fit
yeah,
in any of my channels of workflow. I can do portrait work, but just to have a camera and take photos of my friends while we're riding around is what do I do with these?
yeah, yeah. And I think there's probably for me a slight subconscious attachment to that's work, that's my job, and right now I don't want to be working, and So there's probably some connection there. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's, a film camera here and there is probably the thing that I would lug around if I were to do it, because for the same reason you just stated, with digital files, I'm like, what now? Like, what am I
Yeah.
gonna get into
Even just the
Lightroom and edit
way,
these? That's
even
work.
just the way I organize these, I'm like, what
Yeah,
folder, what
where do I
drive,
go?
and I want
Yeah,
them to be as organized as weddings. And I have been,
yeah,
I rented a Ricoh GR3 recently just because I've been wanting to mess with
nice.
it for a while. I do think that's going to be, for me, I bike a lot, like we talked about, and I really want a camera
Yep,
just in the bike bag because I'm just on the lakefront
yeah,
trail and I'm just seeing so much stuff. Something like that would be neat, but it's just still another thing to carry around. And I think
yeah,
my career and yours, I'm sure, is similar. Like I tell people, yeah, my whole career is just carrying a bag around everywhere I'm at,
yeah,
every train I'm at, every flight I'm
yeah.
on, every excursion I go on. I have a freaking bag with me. So when I'm
Right.
off, I don't want to carry a bag around. I don't want to carry an
Yep,
extra thing. So that makes sense.
yep. I'm 100% with you. And I'm totally content with that. On the other hand, I do sort of envy the people that I know that always have a camera, because they're always taking incredible images. My good friend Jesse from Golden Hour Studios, I don't know if you know him. He is always with his kids with like a Hasselblad or something, and he's shooting these like gorgeous images. I love seeing that work because I'm like, oh, that is just that's. I wish I kind of part of me
But
does wish I
the
was that
effort to
person,
do
but
it,
yeah,
yeah.
and
And I
and
see it.
clearly they find so much enjoyment in it,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And so it would be very forced for me, but um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's just an iPhone these days for the most part.
Nice. Yeah, it can be hard to like not have something on you. And then I see that ray of sunshine come through at golden hour and those two guys in an alley smoking a cigarette. I'm like, how do I not have a kid right now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I think similar like what you said, like it would be forced for you to do it. And I think that the reason Jesse's work is coming out so great is because great things come from a source of enthusiasm. And if you're not
hmm,
inherently enthusiastic about it, it might just feel like work, which would suck.
yep,
Um,
yep,
our last question,
yeah.
what's your problem? What are you working on right now? What are you trying to figure out? What do you think?
I think we are trying to sort out what is sustainable with managing our studios, our life with our kids, our editing workload, and also both Heidi and I shoot a lot of other commercial work. And so
I was
we
wondering,
just,
you have despite having scaled back from travel, you still have a
yeah,
ton going on.
yeah, it's, it seems not sustainable, although I say that every year and somehow we survive. Um, I think we've probably reached, figured out that like, there's 10 photographers total. We have a studio manager, we have some editing help. We feel like that is probably the max amount of personnel before the seams start breaking. Um, Possibly even slightly less. Um, so we're still trying to figure out that balance. I think that is our biggest problem right now, is figuring out that balance, making sure that everyone on our team is happy and in the right place in their life, and we are providing as much as we can for them. So those are probably the bigger sort of questions and problems that we have.
What do you
Um,
think would be the first thing to go if you guys were to like try to trim some fat? If you said, okay, we're feeling the stress, is it going to be not corporate, but the other work that you guys do out, like the other production work that you do, or is it going to be, one of the scaling
um,
down one of the studios?
I think it's going to be just scaling down our own wedding work. Is over the years, even with all that going on, Heidi and I still tend to shoot more weddings than anyone else on our team, and I don't know if that's sustainable.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's the chunk of time. I mean, it's huge. It's
yeah,
just not even just getting to the wedding, but even the wedding itself is just so
the
big.
wedding itself, the space it takes up in your mind week after week, the obviously the prepping, the working with the planners ahead of time, There's the editing aspect, which
The
we have
recovery
sped up more
time.
and more. Yeah, all that. And so I think, um, so from like 2013 to 2018, I was very much focused on my commercial directing career. I very much stepped out of that because I fell out of love with that and more in love with weddings. And over the years have developed more into commercial photography work, specifically aerial work, which actually, going back to your past question, was started out as a hobby. So I never carried a camera around, but wherever we traveled, I did go up in a helicopter and take some photos. And so that was very much like a hobby that lasted, you know, I mean, it was like 8 to 10 years of just doing it for fun before really taking it seriously as like, wait a second, I've now developed kind of an expertise with this and have been able to shoot some really cool jobs for Apple. Just recently did one for Starbucks and going to cool places around the world. And so I think developing that side more, which isn't a lot of shoots, but it's more relationship building and more getting yourself in the right um, spot to be noticed and hired.
And
That's
takes up less
probably,
space than a wedding, or at least 40
yeah,
weddings, you know?
yes, yes. So I think leaving, balancing some of those things out, that is the biggest problem. And I think the solution, which is harder to execute than it seems like, oh, just take less weddings. It's that easy.
Yeah,
It's
just say
hard
no,
when
Ryan.
it's hard when everyone's booked. It's with a planner you love at a venue you love, and the couple seems great, and they're like, take our money. Well, I'm gonna say yes every time. Like it's very
Yeah,
hard to
oh, I get
not
it. That email
take
comes
those
through.
jobs.
I'm not booked. It's really cool. The money is attached.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, I guess. Okay. And even sometimes like I might have a personal engagement the day before, the day after. And I go, well,
Yeah,
I could wiggle around because I want to do that. It's hard.
yeah. So that's yeah. So that's probably the biggest problem. And I know that just by saying that, it's probably comes off quite pretentious. And I know that a lot of people that just trying to get the jobs. That's probably the biggest struggle that most people have. But yeah. So yeah, there's always something that you have to adjust to, and that keeps you on your feet, I guess.
Yeah, I think the problems can scale whether or not you're getting 5 likes on a photo online or you're getting 5 million likes on a photo. The problems of
Yeah.
things within the business, personal life, and everything else that collides with it are just going to scale to the same relativity. So you guys are busy
Yep.
because you worked your ass off for years to be the studio that you are now. And now you have to like pay the price of having to say no to like kind of turn down your own rewards
Yep.
of success. That is a difficult position to be in, but I'm pretty stoked to see how that transitions for you guys from the different studios and going to more aerial work, or if directing and producing comes back into play, continued more. Be pretty cool to see it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm interested as well. We'll check back in a few years and see how it's going.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been really great. Really stoked to get a chance to chat. Sometime, whether it be New York or Chicago, we'll have to overlap some time and grab a drink or a slice or something.
Dude, definitely hit me up when you're in town. We'll for sure get together. Appreciate it, man.
Sick, dude. Have a great one.